We're going to be learning Gemara. And I had a fascinating conversation a couple of days ago. I would love to formalize a Gemara learning course. So someone recommended that I speak to a person about it. Maybe he can help me out. He's very good with presentation, with AI. So I thought, fantastic. I'll phone up the person, ask him if he'll help me out. So I phoned him up and I said, listen, I'm thinking about doing this Gemara thing. Would you be able to help me? He said, absolutely not. I said, why? He said, because I believe Gemara is destroying the Jewish people. I love the passion. So I said, wow. It led into an hour and a quarter conversation whereby he went very strongly supporting his point that the last thing the Jewish people needs is a study of Gemara in their lives. And there's many other things that he has ideas of what they do need. Gemara isn't one of them. In fact, Gemara, he says, is counterproductive. It puts a person in a divisive mindset, and it robs their spiritual potential. So I suppose that may be an important point to address when we think about, well, we here in learning Gemara, and why do I believe differently? So I'll start off with what the Ramchal says, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, in his introduction to the Gemara that he writes on how to study Gemara, which is called Derech Tvunos. In Derech Tvunos, he says, Derech Tvunot. When we look at the world, not everything that meets the eye that we assimilate with our senses is self-evident. In fact, very often what we see is not what we get. It appears to be one thing, it's really something else. The majority of the complexity and the nuance of life is underneath the surface of the appearance, something we've experienced in learning multiple times. Which means, in order to be able to navigate life successfully, we need to develop a perceptive capacity to penetrate the surface and understand what are the underlying mechanisms, what's going on underneath the surface. And without that range of, which boils down to very often a series of well-developed cognitive skills, a person remains almost incapable of navigating life on a deep level. That's the Ramchal. Rebbe Nachman in Likutei Moran, in the first Torah, speaks about the nature of Jewish spiritual work. And he says the power of the Jewish perception is to recognize that underneath the world of complexity and fragmentation, there lies a unifying force. And in order to discover that unifying force, you have to penetrate again to what's underneath it, what's there. When you see a building, well, what is a building? Well, it's a structure. Well, what is a structure? What is it? So you have to be able to conceptualize the concrete. Otherwise, you remain in a world of divisiveness. The only way you can reach unity is when you can understand on the conceptual level that ultimately all things are one. And in order to penetrate and go from layer to layer, you need to have, again, a level of cognitive excellence. So those are two compelling reasons why at least developing your cognitive skills is going to be an enhancement to your spiritual work. The Baal HaTanya says a more spiritual reason. And he says as follows. The problem that we have with spirituality is we are mortal beings in finite bodies with a limited perception. Our minds think only in terms of structure. We can't think beyond what we can think. And as opposed to the Eastern world that looks upon thought only as an obstruction to the pure experience of reality, And there's a reason for that, because the Eastern world sees thought as my own fabrication, my perspective of the world. My perspective of the world is inevitably exceptionally narrow. It's conditioned by my time, by my personality, by my capacity to mentally understand things around me. So whatever I think, in fact, can obstruct reality, which is much broader, much deeper, much more profound. So when I look at a reality through my eyes, what I'm seeing really is a very narrow, very limited slice. I'm not being able to contact or connect to reality. So therefore, the Eastern world goes against the process of cognition and says, if you're able to go beyond thought, then you can truly experience reality. And there's something to be said for that. But the power of Torah, and specifically Gemara, is that we have another pathway. The other pathway is, well, what could be, what would happen if we could somehow lock in to the divine thought mechanism itself? Yes, my thought is completely limited. My capacity to see the world is a product of my limitation, but Hashem's thought is infinite. Could I perhaps think like Hashem? Well, how would I be able to do that? Well, if I could find the way that his mind works, and I could integrate into my mental framework his mental framework, so then there'll be a kind of unity that's created between us that's incomparable to anything else. Because really, the way that I'm operating is based on my perceptions and my mind. If my mind could sync with the divine, there could be nothing more profound and more unifying than that. So the Baal HaTanya says that when you learn the Gemara, and you're able to understand that in this situation, when one person makes the claim in this way and another person makes the claim in another way, the ruling is as such, and you understand the rationale behind it, and you come to a clear conclusion, you have embodied in that thought process two things. By engaging in that concept, you've surrounded yourself by the concept. Because when you're grasping to understand an idea and you haven't quite internalized it, it's almost as if you're struggling to get the idea. The idea is outside of you. So you're surrounded by the idea and you're trying to grapple with it. And when you actually finally understand it, and we use the word grasp, because it's like it's in our hand. We've taken something which is outside of our reach and we put it inside of our reach. That means when we've intellectually grasped something, our mind has taken that notion and it's now inside of us. So what we've been able to do is internalize the divine. And there can be nothing more profound than that. So therefore, to me, those are compelling reasons why Gemara can be such a powerful part of our spiritual journey. And in my mind, it needs to be. Other than it is the origin of all halacha. All halacha comes from the Gemara, it's a derivation. Other than there are many people that don't have a trust in the system of what Judaism is. They're skeptical about the rationale and the reasoning of the rabbis. And they speak about rabbinical Judaism with disdain. All you need to do is spend some time in a Gemara to build up the experience of the rigidity or the thoroughness of the intellectual process, of how deeply involved people are in understanding to the finest nuances of subtle understandings what to do and how to do it. And when you see that repeatedly, you start to recognize that this is not a group of people who are just superstitious, shooting off their mouths without thinking, but you've got the most finest and most brilliantly designed logical structures that you could ever come into contact with. So therefore, I feel that by making this as part of our day and part of our life, we're accessing multiple points of spiritual growth. In other words, essentially, we're sitting in this room, but we're fighting a battle. We're fighting a battle to, I would say in a certain way, reclaim the power and the meaning of the study of Gemara in my life, so that it actually, I walk away from the experience feeling moved forward and not just, oh, I did the right thing today. So now, that's step one of the introduction. Step two of our introduction is we're about to go into a new endeavor together as a group. The new endeavor is creating a focus in our learning. It's called Daf HaShavua. There's a global organization that has a focus study, a curriculum of every week, but they learn one daf, a two-sided folio of Talmud per week. And there are resources available. I feel that becoming part of a bigger movement gives strength, focus, and direction to what we're doing. So we're going to be joining that movement. And they're currently holding in the Gemara in Nedarim, which is the Gemara that deals with the laws of vows, different kinds of vows, and we'll explore them in detail. And because we joining in with them, they've already been doing this for quite a few years. So we're going to be jumping into the middle of their tractate, actually towards the end. And in doing so, I believe there's a tremendous advantage. The laws of Nedarim will have relevance, of vows will have relevance to us in some way, to our lives, but it's certainly not real, vital, and practical halacha. So many people say, when you're learning Gemara, if you are going to be investing that intellectual effort into the study, you should do something practical. So at least you come out with an understanding of some of the practices that you're engaged in. And I understand that contention. I have a different perspective. In order for me to graduate from feeling contained by my world as I experience it, I need to go traveling. I need to see a new world. Quite physically, if I've never left my country, I can't even imagine what other countries are like. I can't imagine other cultures. And if I really want to, let's say I would meet a person and they keep on telling me about the country they live in, and I can't see it. I can't understand it because I've only ever lived in my country. And then one day I get on a plane and I go and I experience their country. And I walk around the mountains they've spoken to me about, and I go into the cities that they've described. I go, whoa, is this what it's all about? I'm able to get out of my previous narrow confines and experience something new. The danger of learning Gemaras, which are halachically orientated, is I stay trapped inside of my world. I don't become a citizen of a spiritual world. I never visit a country that's not the country that I'm currently in. But when I learn a topic that's not directly related to halacha, I'm able to experience something which is completely outside of my realm of experience. And in doing so, I touch on a place where my relationship with Hashem can expand tremendously. Because it's no longer about me and fitting the world into me, it's about me and seeing the world that's beyond me. Which means that the laws that we're going to be discussing may not seem directly relevant, even though I will demonstrate there are certain points which definitely can be extracted for our day-to-day practice. But as a whole, the topic is not. But to me, that's an advantage, not a disadvantage. Good. So that's introduction number 2 to what we're doing. So that means we're going to have a pace to keep up to. It's approximately, if we do it, it's half a page every day for 4 days, and then we'll have Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos to review, and then we start again the next week. We're a little bit, I would like to start at a Mishnah, which means we're like starting off one onward behind, but I think we'll be able to catch up. And in doing so, let's speak about now the perhaps unique feature of this Shiur, which I hope won't be unique for very long, because I hope that it's a system that's easy to implement, and I hope it's the way that Gemara was meant to be learned, and hopefully it can spread wider than our narrow confines. The thrust of our Shiur is to enable ourselves to approach the Talmud and become in tune with the way that it works, understanding every nuanced movement that it has. And there is an enormous difference between understanding something intuitively, but not having a way of articulating it, and the ability to put it into words. When you put it into words, then you can use it. Until it's in the world of language, we can't access it when we want it. So what I'd like to share with you is a series of methods that will enable you to articulate how to approach each and every stage of the Gemara. Good? Excellent. So now, we're going to do some preparation, and we'll split it up. I'd like you to, there's a few sheets here that I'd like you to quickly read through, and then there's the actual Mishnah that I'd like to begin to study. The background is in the Psukim in the Chumash, and then we'll go into the study of the Mishnah, and I think it's worthwhile you doing that in pairs before we go into the discussion itself. ¿Comprendos? Here we go. We've got this thing of Nedarim. We've got this thing of men and women, and a father to his daughter, a husband to his wife. And there's two things I'd like to focus on. It seems that there's something, he's got two options when his daughter or his wife, and we'll speak perhaps in the context which is relevant for us, which is husband-wife, you've got two options. Either he hears her neder, and you can say, oh, I'm okay with that. And if he doesn't respond, then her neder works.
By what time?
Excellent question. Excellent question, the perfect question to be asked. At what time? We know that he has to know about it. And that's what the psukim keep on referring to as b'yom sham'o, on the day that he hears about it. How long does he have to respond? From hearing about it to response, how long does he have?
For the end of the day.
Okay, simply speaking, b'yom sham'o.
It seems like till sunset.
So does b'yom sham'o mean until sunset, or does it mean a 24-hour period?
Sunset.
Seemingly, b'yom sham'o, if it's the yom of sham'o, if he heard it now, so until sunset, he's got a chance. If he heard it last night, he's got a 24-hour period. And the closer it is to shkiat hachama, to sunset, the less time he has. The problem is, yes?
But is beyond Shamo, is it when God heard it or when he heard it?
B'yom shamo, shehu shama ota. Hu shama. He, when he heard it.
But he, the husband.
The husband of the father. Okay? Okay, so good. So this is the complexity. If you go and you look at the verse 15.
Which page? First?
Second page. If you look at verse 15, which it says Ve'im hacharish yacharish la isha miyom el yom. If the husband will surely remain silent from day to day, ve'hekim is called Nedarim. Then he will establish all the vows. So over here, it doesn't sound like it's a sunset, sunrise. It sounds like it's a 24-hour period. The plot thickens. Okay, what is the first thing you do when you meet a new Mishnah? When you meet a Mishnah for the first time, what's the first thing you do? Even before you meet, the first thing you do when you meet a Mishnah for the first time,
Say it loudly.
just read it through. You get a sense of it, read it through loudly, and that's what we're going to do now. Let's see what the Mishnah says in Hebrew, even though you don't understand it. Let's read it through. From the beginning, join me in. Hafarat Nedarim kol hayom. Yesh b'davar l'hakel u'l'hachmir. Keitzad? Nadra b'leilei Shabbos, Yafa b'leilei Shabbos, u'b'yoyim ha'Shabbos, ad shetechshach. Nadra im chashecha, mefer ad sheloi techshach, she'im chashcha loi hafer, eino yachal lahafer. That was one reading. Then we need to do another one, just so it sinks into our bones, a drop more. Are you with me, Tedar? Yeah. Again, Hafarat Nedarim kol hayoin yesh bedavar lahakel ulachmir kaitzad nadra beleile Shabbos yafa beleile Shabbos uveyoyim Shabbos ad shetechshach nadra im chashecha mefer ad sheloi techshach sheim chashcha veloy hefer eino yachol lahafer. Getting a bit of a feel for the Mishnah? Yes? Benj? Zcharia? A little bit? Yakir? Good. Ben? Great. Let's go through and do an accurate translation. After a thorough read-through, we need an accurate translation. Hafarat Nedarim. Now, we saw that in the language of the verses, when it describes the husband annulling the vow, it uses the word lahafer, right? Which in modern Hebrew means like an annulment. You'd use it if a person broke a contract. You would say that it's hafarat, hachozeh. You'd say it's like you undo it. It's a breach of contract. So in this context, it means that if he annuls, he gets rid of, he revokes her vow. So hafarat nedarim is obviously referring between husband and wife. Says the Mishnah, kol hayom, it is the entirety of the day. Kol hayom, it's for the whole day. Now, Zechariah, this will be interesting for you. Yesh bedavar, there is in this matter, lahakel, to be lenient, ulahachmir, and to be stringent. Keitzad, how so? Nadra beleilei Shabbat. She made her oath on a Friday night. Yafer beleilei Shabbat, the husband has an opportunity to annul it on that Friday night. Ubeyom HaShabbat, on the Saturday morning. Ad shetechshach, until it gets dark. Nadra im chashecha, but what happens if she made the oath with darkness, meaning immediately prior to the sunset? So now it's late Saturday afternoon, and she made the oath. Mefer ad shelo techshach, he has only got to annul it until it gets dark. She'im chashcha, that if it gets dark, v'lo hefer, and he doesn't annul it, eino yachol lahafer, is unable to annul it thereafter. Excellent question. Is there a way of getting out of a neder? What happens if you make a neder and you'd like to get out of it? There are two ways of getting out of a neder. One is called hatarat nedarim, and the other one is called, in hatarat nedarim, there's two ways of doing it. One is called a petach, an opening, and one is called charata, regret. So say, for example, I make an oath that I don't want to wear my watch. This watch is forbidden on me. And then I realize it's really hard for me because I need to look to tell the time. And I say, oh my gosh, had I known how hard it would be, I never would have made that oath. That's called charata, that's called regret. If I go in front of three normal people, or what's called a chacham, who's a mumche, a well-respected wise man, either one well-respected wise man or three what's called hediotis, normal people. If I go in front of them and I say, listen, this is what happened, and I really regret it, or it was a total mistake, they say, mutalach, it's permitted to you, and therefore that vow is annulled.
You could do that any time throughout the year?
You can do that any time throughout the year, right? The other way of doing it is finding a petach, something that you didn't know at the time of the vow, that had you known, you never would have made the vow. So for example, I made an oath on this to forbid this watch on me, because I know that I've got a watch at home, and I come home and my watch is gone. Had I known that, I never would have made the vow, so then the vow is annulled retroactively. The difference between annulment of the vow, which a chacham does, or three normal people do, and the hafara of a Baal, is that when a chacham undoes a vow, he does it retroactively. It was never binding. Whereas when a Baal does it, it's from now onwards. So which then makes me think there seems to be something binding about the vow, not like we said previously from the get-go, that the woman is incumbent to honor her oath until unless even if the husband would annul it, it would still be in effect until he actually annuls it. So the problem is, this is where the problem comes in. We've understood what Yom Shamor means, but remember there's that one verse we said, Mi Yom El Yom. We have to figure out what that means. That's going to be our problem. Because we had two verses. The one verse said Yom Shamor, the day he heard, and the other verse said from day till day. And we have to figure out how those two things go together. Okay? So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to, again, go through this mission yourself. I've written a few questions on the second page of the sheet with the verses. Those of you who are familiar with 353 Mat, that's not a problem. Those of you unfamiliar, I will be here to assist you. Okay, let's go. 3 minutes sum up.
Maybe I have.
Zachariah, just hang in for the speed. 3 minutes sum up. Okay, here we go. The Mishnah says, there are in the Mishnah, the first thing you do in the Mishnah after you've read the three is you divide it up into its constituent parts. In our Mishnah, I've discovered 5 parts to our Mishnah. 5 parts to our Mishnah. Part number 1, Hafarat Nedarim Kol Hayom. It's a statement of halacha. It's ruling. Hafarat Nedarim Kol Hayom. The annulment of vows exists for an entire day. Part number 2, but there's a nuance. Yesh b'davar l'hakel l'hachmer. In this matter, you can be lenient or stringent. Part 2, showing there's a nuance. Part 3, Ketzet Haso, question. Part 4, an answer, as follows. Nodra b'leil Shabbos, Yofa b'leil Shabbos, ubi Yom HaShabbos, Asher Techshach. If the vow was made on the night of Shabbos, you've got the entirety of that night and the next day until it gets dark. Nodra im chasheche, if she made the oath right close to sunset, then you can annul it until it gets dark. There's part 4, that's an answer to the question. Statement, question, answer. Third part, is a reason, because if it gets dark and you haven't yet annulled, you can no longer annul. So there are 5 parts of the Mishnah. They are statement, nuance in that halachic statement of ruling, a ruling and a nuance, a question, an answer, and a reason.
Why are you splitting the first 2 parts? With the 2?
Why am I splitting the first 2 parts? Because one is telling me halacha. Hafarat kol yom. That's one ruling. That is a ruling in its own right. There's an additional point, which is that there's 2 different consequences, kula and chumrah. It's an addition to the psak halacha. There's a psak halacha, and then there's an added point of how it's implemented. Do you want to call it A and B? I'll give you A and B. Okay? Now, that's called, what are the parts? How many? 5. And they're in the order because that's the natural order of the thinking. I want you to just point out now just a few strange things, which is our next stage in our 353 mission analysis technique. The 3 is what are the parts, how many were in this order. Now we're going to the 5 crucial questions we ask. The first of them is details. Is there anything in the Mishnah which is strange or extra, and if so, why? Well, Hafarat Nedarim Kol Yom is not strange or extra. Yesh b'davar l'hakel l'hachmer, you can be stringent, you can be lenient. No, you can't. There's no stringency or leniency over here. We're talking about a time period, either long or shorter. That's no stringency and a leniency. That's my first question. Second question is, I'm okay with the answer at this stage, and I have no idea why we need the 5th part of the Mishnah. That if it gets dark and you don't annul your vow, you're unable to do so. But you told me this
That is a time thing.
That is a time thing, but you've already told me it. You already told me when you said, Hafarat Nedarim Kol Hayom. It means you've got the day. Why do you think saying if you don't do it during the day, you can't do it afterwards? Do I need to be told that?
That's why, for me, it makes more sense to count that Hafarat Nedarim as just one part instead of saying it's the first half of it as a ruling. Because it seems more as a statement that introduces everything that follows. And then the 4th case for me is the ruling. Not ruling.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We're on a time constraint. Tomorrow we'll go into this. Thank you for your attendance.